20 black bands? From the 1970s that vanished without a trace, the 1970s gave us unforgettable grooves, legendary voices, and black bands that set dance floors on fire. But where did they go? Some soared, some faded, and others just vanished. Join us as we uncover the rise, fall, and hidden stories behind 20 iconic groups you might have forgotten, but will never stop feeling. Earth, Wind, and Fire. Few bands have ever matched the power, energy, and creativity of Earth, Wind, and Fire. Founded in 1969 by the visionary Maurice White, this group didn't just play music, they created a universe of sound. Blending funk, soul, jazz, R&B, and even rock, they pushed boundaries and lifted spirits with every note. Their songs weren't just catchy, they were uplifting, spiritual, and unforgettable. Who can hear September or Shining Star without smiling? The original lineup included a host of talented musicians, including Maurice's brother Verdine White, vocalist Sherry Scott, keyboardists Wade Flemons and Don Whitehead, and horn players like Leslie Drayton and Chester Washington. As the band evolved, new voices like Philip Bailey joined the mix, bringing in that iconic falsetto that helped define their signature sound. Though lineup changes came and went, the spirit of Earth, Wind, and Fire never faded. Maurice White retired from touring in the 1990s after battling Parkinson's disease and sadly passed away in 2016. Other founding members like Wade Flemons and Roland Bautista have also left us. Today, Verdine White, Philip Bailey, and Ralph Johnson carry the torch, keeping the magic alive with a new generation of musicians. The JBs. The JBs weren't just James Brown's backing band. They were the heartbeat of funk in the early 1970s. Born out of a shakeup in Brown's lineup in 1970, the JBs stepped in with something electric. Led by powerhouse players like the young and funky Bootsy Collins on bass and trombone wizard Fred Wesley, they brought an unmistakable groove that changed everything. You could feel it in every beat of Pass the Peas and the relentless drive of Doing It to Death. These tracks weren't just songs, they were statements, rhythm-heavy explosions that made you move. But the JBs weren't content to stay in the background. They stepped into the spotlight themselves, dropping albums that brought their signature horn stabs, bass lines, and tight grooves front and center. Their style was raw, funky, and contagious, spreading far beyond the shadow of James Brown. As Brown's star dimmed in the late 70s and early 80s, the JBs started to fade from view. By the mid-1980s, the band had quietly disbanded. Still, their core members, especially Fred Wesley and saxophonist Maceo Parker, kept the funk alive, working with major acts and carving their own legacies. The JBs may have vanished, but their sound still echoes through every funk-infused beat that followed. Labelle. Labelle wasn't just a band, they were a movement. Rising from the ashes of Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells, the trio of Patti LaBelle, Nona Hendryx, and Sarah Dash reinvented themselves in the early 1970s and never looked back. They threw out the traditional girl group image and stepped into something bold, loud, and entirely their own. Think glitter, silver jumpsuits, feathered headdresses, and a sound that could blow the roof off any venue. Their groundbreaking blend of rock, funk, and soul created a new lane for black women in music. And when they dropped Lady Marmalade in 1974, the world took notice. That provocative, unforgettable anthem shot to the top of the charts and made them icons overnight. The album Nightbirds, which carried that mega hit, was a genre-bending triumph that solidified Labelle's place in music history. But after reaching their peak, the group disbanded in 1976. Each member took her own path. Patti LaBelle became a powerhouse solo act, Nona Hendryx dove into experimental political sounds, and Sarah Dash built a respected career as a versatile session vocalist. In 2008, they came together one last time for Back to Now, reminding fans of the magic they once created. Their legacy lives on, especially after Sarah Dash's passing in 2021. Forever fierce, fearless, and unforgettable. The Chi Lights. From the heart of Chicago came a group that could melt hearts with just a few notes, the Chi-Lites. Formed in 1959, the original lineup included Eugene Record, Robert Lester, Creedle Red Jones, and Marshall Thompson. What set them apart? It was their smooth blend of soul and R&B, paired with lush harmonies and emotional storytelling. By the early 1970s, they were topping the charts with unforgettable ballads like Have You Seen Her and Oh Girl, songs that still tug at the heartstrings decades later. Eugene Record was more than just the lead singer. He was the group's creative engine, writing most of their biggest hits. His voice and lyrics gave the Chi-Lites their signature sound, rich, romantic, and deeply relatable. But as the music landscape changed in the late 70s, Record left the group, and although he returned for a short time in the 80s, things were never quite the same. Despite ongoing lineup changes, the Chi-Lites kept performing through the years with founding member Marshall Thompson holding the torch. He became the group's heartbeat until his passing in 2016. Though the original quartet never reunited, their legacy lives on. The Chi-Lites didn't just make music, they gave us soul memories that still echo through time. The Emotions. The Emotions brought joy, soul, and harmony to every stage they stepped on. Born out of Chicago in 1968, this powerhouse trio of sisters, Wanda, Sheila, and Jeanette Hutchinson, began their musical journey singing gospel. But by the early 1970s, they made a graceful shift into R&B and disco, and that's when the magic truly began. With voices that melted together like silk, the sisters gained attention for their rich harmonies and uplifting style. Their big break came when they teamed up with Morris White of Earth, Wind and Fire. Under his guidance, they crafted Best of My Love, a disco soul anthem that soared to #1. Won on the charts in 1977. The song won them a Grammy Award and solidified their place in music history. Their success wasn't just about one hit. The Emotions delivered a string of feel-good tracks and heartfelt ballads that became R&B staples. But the music world began to shift in the 1980s. With changing tastes, record label challenges, and new trends emerging, their mainstream spotlight began to fade. By 1985, the original trio stopped performing together regularly. Still, the Hutchinson sisters have occasionally reunited for special performances, keeping the spirit of the Emotions alive. Have you ever seen any of these groups live back in the day? We'd love to hear your concert stories in the comments. The Dramatics. Coming out of Detroit's rich musical soil, the Dramatics carved their place in soul history with a sound that was both raw and refined. Formed in 1964, the group originally featured Ron Banks, Larry Demps, Elbert Wilkins, Willie Ford, and the powerfully emotive William Wee.G. Howard. They weren't just another soul group, they were storytellers rapping heartfelt lyrics in layers of harmony and passion. It wasn't until the early 1970s that they truly broke through, and when they did, they hit hard. What You See Is What You Get delivered funk-infused attitude, while In the Rain tugged at the heartstrings with its emotional depth. Their music felt personal, authentic, like they were singing just for you. With multiple top 10 hits and gold-certified records, the Dramatics became a soul staple on radio and stage alike. Yet, like many groups of their time, they faced challenges. Over the years, members came and went, and time took its toll. The passing of key figures like Ron Banks and Willie Ford marked the end of the original lineup. Still, their influence didn't fade. New generations continue to sample, cover, and be inspired by their work. The Dramatics might not be in today's spotlight, but their soul still echoes through the music that followed. The Moments. The Moments brought a tender, emotional touch to 1970s soul, delivering love songs that became instant classics. Hailing from Washington, D.C., they formed in 1965 and soon found their stride with a string of silky, slow-burning hits, with Al Goodman, Billy Brown, and Harry Ray as the trio's heart and soul. The Moments gave us unforgettable tracks like Love on a Two-Way Street and Sexy Mama, songs that turned everyday heartache into something beautiful. Their smooth harmonies and romantic lyrics made them fan favorites on Quiet Storm Radio and slow dance playlists everywhere. But the ride wasn't without its bumps. In 1978, a legal dispute forced the group to change their name. Reborn as Ray, Goodman, and Brown, they didn't miss a beat. Their hit Special Lady proved they still had the magic, soaring once again into the R&B spotlight. Still, time brought change. Harry Ray left in 1982 for a solo run, but later rejoined before his untimely death in 1992. The group continued with new members, but the golden era of the Moments slowly slipped away. Al Goodman passed in 2010, and Billy Brown suffered a stroke in 2016, drawing the curtain on one of soul's sweetest acts. The Delfonics. The Delfonics were the velvet voice of Philly soul, delivering smooth harmonies and tender love songs that helped define a generation. Formed in 1965, the group featured brothers William and Wilbert Hart, alongside Randy Kane, later joined by Major Harris. With their silky vocals and heartfelt lyrics, they quickly captured the hearts of soul fans everywhere. And behind the scenes was producer Tom Bell, whose lush orchestral arrangements gave the group their signature sound. Hits like La La Means I Love You and Didn't I Blow Your Mind This Time weren't just chart toppers, they were soul masterpieces. The Delfonics brought an elegant kind of romance to the airwaves, and their music set the tone for the entire Philadelphia soul movement. By the early 70s, they were riding high with gold records and sold-out shows. But as the decade moved on, things started to shift. Randy Kane departed in 1971, and Tom Bell moved on to work with other artists. The group's momentum slowed and the original magic began to fade. Members went their separate ways, each exploring solo opportunities. War wasn't just a band. They were a genre-blending powerhouse that broke musical boundaries and cultural barriers. Formed in 1969 in Long Beach, California, War was a melting pot of styles and backgrounds. The original lineup included Eric Burden of the Animals, guitarist Howard Scott, harmonica master Lee Oscar, and keyboardist Lonnie Jordan. Together, they cooked up a fusion of funk, jazz, Latin, soul, and rock that felt fresh and fearless. Their first big splash came with the psychedelic groove Spill the Wine. But that was only the beginning. Throughout the 1970s, War dominated the airwaves with iconic tracks like The Cisco Kid, Why Can't We Be Friends, and the ever-cool Lowrider. Their music carried messages of unity, social justice, and community, wrapped in irresistible grooves that got people dancing and thinking. But as with many great bands, success brought tension. Eric Burden exited early, and by the late 70s, internal struggles fractured the group. Tragedy struck with the murder of saxophonist Charles Miller in 1980, and the onstage death of percussionist Papa D. Allen in 1988. These losses marked the beginning of the end for the original lineup. By the 1990s, War had split in two. Lonnie Jordan carried the band's name with new members, while other founders formed the Lowrider Band. Ike and Tina Turner Revue. The Ike and Tina Turner Revue was more than just a musical act. It was a full-blown spectacle. Bursting onto the scene in 1960, the group combined raw energy, driving rhythms, and unforgettable showmanship. Led by Ike Turner and his electrifying wife Tina, they quickly built a reputation as one of the most explosive live acts of the era. Backed by Ike's band, the Kings of Rhythm, and the high-stepping Ikettes, every performance felt like a thunderstorm of soul, funk, and rock. Their hits became legendary. Proud Mary turned a Creedence Clearwater Revival song into a fiery soul anthem. River Deep, Mountain High, produced by Phil Spector, showcased Tina's powerhouse vocals like never before. And Nutbush City Limits, a semi-autobiographical tune, became a funk rock classic. But behind the music, the story was darker. While Tina's voice and stage presence were mesmerizing, she endured years of abuse from Ike. A truth that wouldn't fully come to light until after their professional and personal split in 1976. Tina's decision to walk away was a defining moment in music and personal strength. She went on to reinvent herself, becoming one of the most celebrated solo artists in history. Ike, meanwhile, faced a downward spiral of legal and personal struggles until his death in 2007, What's the one 1970s jam that instantly takes you back? Share your go-to memory song. The Main Ingredient. The Main Ingredient brought a special kind of soul to the music scene. Smooth, heartfelt, and always easy on the ears. Formed in Harlem in 1964, the original trio of Donald McPherson, Luther Simmons Jr., and Tony Sylvester blended sweet harmonies with thoughtful lyrics. They were rising stars in the R&B world when tragedy struck in 1971. Donald McPherson, their original lead singer, passed away suddenly just as the group was on the brink of mainstream success. That's when Cuba Gooding Sr. stepped in, and the group took off. In 1972, they released their biggest hit, Everybody Plays the Fool, a soulful anthem about heartbreak that shot up the charts and remains a classic today. With follow-ups like Just Don't Want to Be Lonely and Happiness is Just Around the Bend, The Main Ingredient became a mainstay on R&B radio, known for their feel-good grooves and polished vocals. But like many groups from that era, they couldn't escape the shifts of the music industry. Lineup changes and the departure of Gooding in 1977 made it harder to keep their momentum. Though they reunited occasionally, the magic of the original trio faded with time. When Cuba Gooding Sr. passed away in 2017, it marked the end of an era. The Spinners. The Spinners were the definition of smooth. Born in 1954 in Ferndale, Michigan, they spent years waiting in the wings before finally exploding onto the soul scene in the 1970s. Their velvet harmonies, crisp arrangements, and feel-good rhythms turned them into one of the most beloved R&B groups of their time. Songs like I'll Be Around, Could It Be I'm Falling in Love, and Then Came You became instant classics, etched into the soundtrack of the decade. The original lineup, Henry Fambrough, Billy Henderson, Purvis Jackson, Bobby Smith, and G.C. Cameron, laid the foundation. But it was the addition of lead singer Philippe Wynne in the early 70s that gave the group a golden era boost. His dynamic vocals helped the Spinners reach the top of the charts and stay there. Whether it was a love ballad or a dance floor groove, the Spinners knew how to deliver the goods. But like many long-running groups, time took its toll. Philippe left for a solo career in 1977, and the lineup began to shift. Billy Henderson departed under tense circumstances in 2004. Purvis Jackson passed in 2008, Bobby Smith followed in 2013, and G.C. Cameron had long moved on. Henry Fambrough, the group's final original member, kept the legacy alive into the 2020s. Even as the spotlight dimmed, the Spinners' timeless sound continues to inspire new generations. And their legacy? Still spinning strong. Commodores. The Commodores brought a perfect mix of funk, soul, and smooth ballads to the 1970s, and they did it with undeniable style. Formed in 1968 at Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, the original lineup included Lionel Richie, Thomas McClary, William King, Ronald LaPred, Milan Williams, and Walter Orange. Their journey started like many great bands, grinding through college gigs and small venues before exploding onto the national stage. By the mid-1970s, the Commodores were a household name. With funky bass-driven anthems like Brick House and soulful classics like Easy and 3 Times a Lady, they showed off both their musical versatility and emotional depth. Lionel Richie, with his silky voice and songwriting chops, quickly became the face and heart of the group's biggest hits. But the golden era couldn't last forever. In 1982, Richie left to pursue a solo career, which took him to even greater heights, but marked the end of the group's original chemistry. Thomas McClary followed suit in 1983, and Ronald LaPred exited in 1986. The band continued with new members, still recording and touring, but the magic of the original lineup was never quite recaptured. Still, the Commodores' impact on music is permanent. Their songs are timeless, their grooves unforgettable, and their name still carries the power of a golden age in soul and funk. Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes were one of the crown jewels of Philadelphia soul, known for their elegant harmonies, emotional ballads, and socially conscious themes. Formed in the late 1950s but finding fame in the 1970s, the group finally hit their stride when Teddy Pendergrass joined as lead singer. With his deep, commanding voice out front and Harold Melvin's vision guiding the group, they created a sound that was both polished and passionate. Their breakthrough came with the timeless "If You Don't Know Me By Now," a ballad soaked in heartbreak and sincerity. That was followed by the disco-tinged anthem "The Love I Lost" and other powerful tracks like "Wake Up Everybody" and "Bad Luck." These weren't just love songs, they were statements, blending romance with reflection and setting a new standard in soul music. But in 1976, everything changed. Teddy Pendergrass left the group to pursue a solo career, and with him went the voice that defined their greatest hits. While the group tried to rebuild, first with David Ebo, then with Gil Saunders, they couldn't recapture the magic of their peak years. Harold Melvin kept the group going in various forms until his death in 1997. Though the lineup changed, the music remained. MFSB, short for Mother, Father, Sister, Brother, wasn't your typical band. They were a powerhouse collective of over 30 talented studio musicians who laid the foundation for an entire era of music. Formed in 1971 in Philadelphia, MFSB became the backbone of Philadelphia International Records, and their fingerprints are all over the biggest soul and disco hits of the 1970s. These were the artists behind the scenes, giving life to tracks by the OJs, Harold Melvin, and the Blue Notes, the Spinners, and countless others. With smooth strings, tight rhythms, and that unmistakable Philly groove, MFSB helped shape what became known as the Sound of Philadelphia, a sound both polished and full of heart. Their crowning moment came in 1974 with the release of TSOP, The Sound of Philadelphia, a funky orchestral instrumental that doubled as the iconic theme for Soul Train. It soared to number one on the charts, and became the anthem of a movement. But as disco faded in the late 70s, so did MFSB's prominence. Creative disagreements and shifts in the music industry led to their gradual dissolution by the early 1990s. Some members went on to form or join the Salsoul Orchestra, while others returned to session work. Though they vanished quietly, MFSB's groove still pulses in the DNA of modern R&B, soul, and dance music. Their sound, pure gold. Thank you for watching. To continue with more content, comment 1 to let us know you're still following. The Blackbyrds. The Blackbyrds were a unique blend of brains and groove, fusing the academic world with the street-smart sounds of funk and jazz. Formed in 1973 by legendary jazz trumpeter Donald Byrd and his talented students at Howard University, the group emerged from Washington, D.C., with a sound that was both smooth and infectious. These weren't just session players, they were scholars of sound, and they knew how to make music that moved both the mind and the body. With Kevin Toney on keys, Keith Kilgo on drums and vocals, Joe Hall on bass, Alan Barnes on sax and clarinet, and Barney Perry on guitar, the Blackbyrds crafted some of the coolest tracks of the 70s. Walking in Rhythm was their breakout hit, floating effortlessly across jazz, R&B, and pop radio. And Rock Creek Park, a funky instrumental anthem that still gets sampled and spun today. As the disco wave crashed and music trends shifted in the early 80s, the Blackbyrds struggled to maintain their momentum. Members began pursuing solo paths or other ventures, and the group gradually dissolved. But they never really disappeared. Their music continues to live on, echoing through samples in hip-hop, funk revival playlists, and the ears of music lovers who know timeless groove when they hear it. Royce. Royce exploded onto the music scene in the 1970s with a sound that blended soul, funk, and disco into pure gold. Hailing from Los Angeles, the band formed in 1973 and got their big break when they were chosen to record the soundtrack for the movie Car Wash. What started as a film gig turned into a musical milestone when the title track Car Wash hit number one on the charts in 1976, It became a cultural anthem and launched the band into stardom. Led by the dynamic Gwen Dickey, whose powerhouse vocals gave life to so many of their hits, Royce wasn't just a band, they were a movement. The lineup included talents like drummer Henry Garner, bassist LeQuaint Duke Job, saxophonist Michael Moore, and trumpet player Kenny Copeland, among others. Together, they delivered timeless tracks like I Want to Get Next to You, the dreamy Wishing on a Star, and the heartbreak ballad Love Don't Live Here Anymore. But the spotlight faded quickly. By the early 1980s, musical tastes were shifting and tension inside the group grew. In 1980, Gwen Dickey left to pursue a solo career, and without her voice, Royce struggled to recapture their earlier magic. Mandrill. Mandrill wasn't your average funk band. They were musical adventurers who pushed the boundaries of sound. Formed in 1968 in Brooklyn, New York, by the Wilson brothers, Carlos, Lou, and Rick, the group blended funk, jazz, Latin rhythms, rock, and even African beats into something bold and entirely their own. At a time when genres were starting to cross over, Mandrill dove right in and came out with a sound that was as energetic as it was unpredictable. In the early 1970s, they gained attention with tracks like Fence Walk and Ape is High, songs that pulsed with rhythm, social commentary, and musical complexity. Their albums were packed with adventurous compositions and vibrant instrumentals that set them apart from their funk contemporaries. Whether it was a Latin groove, a soulful horn section, or a gritty funk bass line, Mandrill knew how to keep you moving and thinking. But the music scene was shifting. As disco rose and tastes changed, Mandrill's eclectic style started to fall out of favor. By the mid-1980s, many of the original members had moved on to other projects. Still, the Wilson brothers never gave up. They carried the name forward, bringing in new players and continuing to perform. Though the spotlight may have dimmed, Mandrill's fearless fusion of styles still echoes in the worlds of jazz funk, hip-hop, and beyond. The Jackson Five. Formed in Gary, Indiana in 1964, the group featured 5 young brothers, Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, Marlon, and a preteen Michael Jackson, whose talent and charisma lit up every stage they stepped on. Under the strict guidance of their father and manager, Joe Jackson, they broke through racial barriers and became one of the first African-American groups to achieve massive crossover success in mainstream pop. Signed to Motown Records in 1969, the Jackson 5 stormed the charts with infectious hits like I Want You Back, ABC, and I'll Be There. With their flashy moves, coordinated outfits, and young Michael's explosive vocals and charm, they became instant icons. Girls screamed, records flew off the shelves, and they dominated television and radio throughout the early 70s. But as the decade progressed, creative frustration began to build. The group wanted more control over their music, and in 1975, they parted ways with Motown. They signed with Epic Records and rebranded as the Jacksons. Jermaine stayed behind, loyal to Motown, and was replaced by younger brother Randy. Though they continued to release solid music, the spotlight gradually shifted to Michael. With the release of Off the Wall in 1979 and Thriller shortly after, Michael became a global superstar, eclipsing the group that first introduced him to the world. The Stylistics. In the world of 70s soul, the Stylistics were smooth like velvet. Hailing from Philadelphia, they hit the scene in 1968 with a style that would soon define an entire genre: Philly soul. The group featured the golden falsetto of Russell Tompkins Jr., backed by Herb Merle, Arian Love, James Smith, and James Dunn. Together, they crafted a sound that was elegant, emotional, and unforgettable. With hits like Betcha by Golly, Wow, You Make Me Feel Brand New, and You Are Everything, the Stylistics had a knack for delivering love songs that went straight to the heart. Their music was lush, polished, and dreamy, thanks in large part to producer Tom Bell, who helped mold their signature style. Bell's sophisticated arrangements and the group's vocal blend were a match made in soul heaven. But change came fast. When Tom Bell stepped away from the group in 1974, their US success started to fade. They still found loyal fans in the UK where their sound continued to thrive, but lineup changes followed. By the early 80s, both James Dunn and James Smith had left the group. These legendary bands may have faded from the spotlight, but their music still echoes through time. Did we miss one of your favorites? Drop it in the comments. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Pass Not Pass with someone who loves the groove. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.